All right. Hello. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Um, all right. Let's make a start, I suppose. So today, let me just unplug this. Okay. Today, what we're going to be looking at in this first isolation English lesson, that's a mouthful, English lesson, um, will be spotting the differences between simple, compound, and complex sentences, and then learning how to, use those skills to construct simple, compound, and complex sentences. Um, After that, once the lesson is over, the lesson should really only take 10-15 minutes. And after that, I'll upload the whole thing to YouTube. So hopefully, if anyone's got any teacher friends or parents with kids who are at home or whatever, they can use this maybe as a homework task or something like that, just to keep them engaged in their learning. So we'll make a start. Um, so all sentences start with a clause. There are two types of clauses. There are independent and dependent clauses. So independent clauses, they work just like a complete sentence, basically, by themselves. So these clauses, for example, I like trains, I hate buses, I don't know how to bake, I buy bread that's already been made. These are all independent clauses because by themselves, without any other flourish, they can work as a sentence from beginning to end. I won't get into too much like the linguistics of what are the elements of a clause and break it down that far because it's not really necessary unless you're going into linguistics. That's a clause. That's an independent clause. A dependent clause is one that needs an independent clause to latch onto. So without an independent clause, a dependent clause can't exist. A lot like human beings, I guess. So these ones are a bit more needy. They don't make much sense by themselves. They need an independent clause to attach themselves to. So because they smell funny, or what she had realized was that, or that you bought for me. These are all independent clauses these are all dependent clauses. Without an independent clause to attach themselves to, they don't really make much sense. They don't give you any information. So I'm going to stop there for a second. If anyone wants to send me a question on Twitter or in the chat, feel free to. I'll just give you a couple minutes to write a question, and obviously this bit will be edited out and streamlined for the YouTube video. Alrighty, didn't get any questions, that's fine, that's good. That means we're all understanding stuff. Let's move on. Okay, so a simple sentence is essentially just an independent clause, right? It works by itself, just like I demonstrated before. I like trains, I hate buses. These are all independent clauses. They work as simple sentences by themselves. Compound sentences is when it starts to get a little bit more complex. So, well, complex is the wrong word to use, given that we're going to talk about complex sentences. But a compound sentence is basically just two independent clauses joined together. So you do this with a conjunction. What fancy people call a conjunction. Again, that's a linguistics term. You don't really need to know it. Basically, ands, or, ifs, buts, those things. So I like trains, but I hate buses. I don't know how to bake, so I buy bread that's already been made. Both compound sentences. Complex sentences are where things get a little bit more tricky, and this is kind of the crux of the lesson, I suppose. So, basically, there are many, many different types of complex sentences. Broadly, they all have dependent clauses attaching themselves to independent clauses, and that task, I suppose, as a writer, is how you make a complex sentence by joining the two different types of clauses. So, I like trains, but I hate buses because they smell funny. Complex sentence. I don't know how to bake, so I buy bread that's already been made because ain't nobody got time for that. Complex sentence. Despite, just ignore the fact that that's actually kind of grammatically incorrect, obviously, but, it's a quote. I put it in quotation marks. That's why that's there. So, some examples from texts. Let him who has been deceived complain. That is actually a complex sentence, and most people get confused with this kind of complex sentence because it doesn't have commas in it, right? So, it is still a complex sentence because if we have a look here, if we kind of break this down a little bit, I can see my camera's in the way. Ooh, let me do this. Make myself smaller. So, let him who has been deceived complain. Now, if we took out let him who has been deceived, that would stand alone as a simple sentence, right? Or actually, that would be, no, it wouldn't. Any part of this, really, if you take it apart, would be a dependent clause. It would be a dependent clause. Let him who has been deceived wouldn't make sense. Who has been deceived complain? Maybe that would work as a simple sentence. That would be an independent clause. And then the let him would probably be the dependent clause. What she had realized was that love was that moment when your heart was about to burst. Kind of gross, but Go with the Dragon Tattoo, Stieg Larsson, that is a complex sentence because what she had realized by itself doesn't work, was that love was the moment when your heart was about to burst. If you took out that, just made this a capital T, that love was the moment that your heart was about to burst, that wouldn't work either. However, if you started with the L, love was that moment when your heart was about to burst, maybe, but it still doesn't really pass as a dependent clause. If you were to change it to love is the moment when your heart is about to burst, then that would work as a dependent clause. But altogether, these are just like independent and dependent clauses working together to form a more complex sentence. It's easier to see with these sentences where the independent and dependent clauses are because you don't have to change anything. So, I like trains exists as a dependent clause, as an independent clause, but I hate buses. If you take out the but, I hate buses, independent clause. Even they smell funny. But once you put in those, this is a this is a compound sentence from here. So I hate buses because they smell funny would be a compound sentence. I like trains but I hate buses makes it into a complex sentence. All right. From there, we'll have another question time. Okay. Simple sentence. I've got a question here from Vintendo. Hey, Vinny. Simple sentence equals one independent clause. Compound sentence equals two independent clauses joined with but and therefore complex sentences equals one or more independent clauses and an independent one or more independent no. Yes. 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 Essentially that is right. Yeah. So a compound sentence is two independent clauses joined with a conjunction. Yep. Complex sentences are one or more independent clauses plus dependent clauses. Usually it's one independent clause plus multiple dependent clauses. However, basically you can have a run-on sentence, right? So you can have a sentence as long as you like, essentially. And they can include as many independent clauses and dependent clauses. It's just not very good writing to have a run-on sentence, but yes, you can have. If you Wikipedia this, they'll have literally a list of all the different types of complex sentences that you can have, but essentially that's it. It's just dependent clauses mixed in with independent clauses. Cool. I think that's all I got. Let me just check Twitter quickly, because I am streaming this elsewhere. No, cool. All right. So, as homework, quick homework task. Since we're all at home anyway. What I'll get everyone to do, if you want to just practice this, it's obviously not necessary, but if you want to practice this, Find the nearest book, open to any page, find one simple compound or complex sentence. There will be all three on a page because good writers basically interchange these three things, right? So what builds cadence is a variance between your simple, compound, and complex sentences. So you don't want to just have three complex sentences back to back to back. You want to have compound sentences and simple sentences worked in there as well. So if you have a good book, you should be able to find all on one page a simple, a compound, and a complex sentence. Try to identify the dependent and independent clauses, and once you've got that, that's essentially the gist of what makes. Honestly, this is like bread and butter for good writing skill. In terms of writing technique and like how to generate a story, we might cover that later. But this is like your bread and butter for just being able to write anything well is having some sort of variance between your simple, compound, and complex sentences. And that's it. That's the lesson. So hopefully that worked for you guys. What we'll do tomorrow, I'll leave that up. What we'll do tomorrow is probably punctuation. So we'll probably do, brackets, commas, dashes, semicolons, colons, etc. Because most people don't know how to use a semicolon. They're really not that great. You probably don't need to use them, but people like to know. So we'll cover semicolons tomorrow, and then we might take a break for a week, and I'll try and do 2 of these a week or something like that. So thanks for joining me, and hopefully your isolation isn't too isolating, and hopefully you're all staying safe and following, you know, the rules of what we need to be doing. I'll see you later.